Hi there, Nathan Satan back with another build video, and in today's video we are going to be going over how to make our steps burn so much hotter than they ever have before. This build is going to be centered around Path of the Burning Steps, so that way when we are getting solar final blows, we are producing a escalating damage bonus called Firewalker. The unique thing about Firewalker is that it does stack with Radiance. We're going to focus this build around stacking with Radiant, so that way we always at least have Radiant plus whatever else to stack with damage around our weapons and our abilities. And like every other build video that I do, I will leave the build on the screen the entire time, so that way you guys don't have to skip around looking for the right mods and the right sections. I will also be leaving a dim link below in the description. I will also be leaving a alternative build so that way you don't have to use Lament, and if you don't have Lucent Blade, this build will still work for you in a different way. Like you can use Gallowhorn, you can use any other solar weapons, and you will still get a big damage boost. Also, if there's any questions or tips that you want to leave, feel free to comment those as well. Or if you have any build requests, I love trying to make other builds and exotics work. It can be difficult at times, and there are like some more optimal ones, but there are a lot of fun ones too, and not every build needs to be the most OP top tier build. Sometimes you just want to make things more interesting in the game. This build does leave a lot of space open, so that way you can switch up your mods to handle end-game champions and such. But ultimately, this build is going to give us an increase in all aspects of weapon damage, ability damage, and even super damage. I won't lie to you, this isn't going to be a build where you just run over everything in front of you, no matter the level. If you are not within a certain level of the content, it is going to be difficult if it has a solar burn or something like that. Like against these Cabal, they can melt you incredibly fast, even with restoration and such, even with 100 resilience if you are not within the right delta scale. So to begin with, I am using Hammer of Soul as the super. I just prefer it. It's a little easier to travel around. You don't have to just stand in place and slam your hammer. You can throw it on the ground, and it does apply Scorch and Ignitions when you are constantly spamming it. And then for the other abilities, we are running Rally Barricade, so that way we can increase our weapon reload speed, stability, and range. We're using Throwing Hammer, so that way we don't really ever run out of our melee, and it does apply Cure when we strike a target and pick it back up. And for the grenade, you can run whatever grenade you want. I am just using healing nades here, so that way I am able to keep restoration up whenever I need it, and this allows it to future-proof this build a little bit more. You can also use whatever grenade you feel comfortable with if you want to cause damage. And then for our solar aspects, we're going to be using Soul Invictus, so that way our solar abilities are Hammer of Soul, Impacts, and our defeating of scorched targets create sunspots, which Incandescence will create scorched targets, and when you defeat them, you will get sunspots from that. On top of having Solar Ignition, which will get a damage increase because of the build we are running. And then with Soul Invictus, we are going to be using Roaring Flames, because then final blows with our abilities or ignitions are going to increase the damage of our solar abilities. So our hammer bonks are going to be even more bonkier. And then our uncharged melee attacks still deal solar damage and scorches targets, so that way we are regenerating abilities and such faster, and able to create a sunspot when we defeat a scorched target. So that way we are essentially able to create sunspots whenever we need. Now for the fragments, I'm using Ember of Blistering. Since this build centers around getting ignitions and defeating targets with ignitions, we are able to get our healing nades faster, or whichever grenade we choose to run faster. And then Ember of Torches, so our powered melee attacks make us and our allies radiant and get our damage boost. Ember of Ashes, so that way we are applying more Scorch stacks to targets and able to get those ignitions a lot faster before enemies die. And then finally, Ember of Empyrean. Our final blows with weapons and abilities extend our duration of restoration and radiant. Now this version of the build is going to center around a solar sword. Lament is the best solar sword in the game currently, and probably the best sword in the game for DPS, so this is why we're using it. Now it's pretty tough to keep track of all the buffs that we will be getting, because we will have Charge with Light, Roaring Flames, Firewalker, and on top of all of which we'll be stacking with Radiant. Now I apologize that I'm not able to give a full-on damage breakdown on buffs and such, since we have so many going all at once, and they are all kind of either replacing one another or making sure that we have some form of damage boost active at all times or near all times. Until the UI gets upgraded in Destiny 2, it's kind of hard to track all these buffs and debuffs and such, so we just kind of have to guesstimate and hope for the best. The nice thing about Lament is it does come with anti-barriers, so that way we are able to run whatever other mod we need in our arms slot. So if we have to deal with unstoppables, we can run that instead of an anti-barrier and just hit things with our sword when we need anti-barrier. Now for the weapon, I do recommend running something with incandescent, and if you can craft something with enhanced incandescent, I would recommend it fully. And then for my special weapon, I'm using Grave Robber and this Callus mini tool because it is super clutch and very nice to use, and I finally got it crafted. And then with enhanced incandescent, you will get a nice damage boost. And this is where the nice synergy comes in with high energy fire and radiant. This will cause our scorch that we cause with incandescent to have a higher DOT, which is damage over time, and also lead us to bigger ignition damage. And then getting into the mods, we are running on burning steps. I'm just using elemental charge, so that way we get a charge with light ×2 when we pick up a solar well. And then on our helmet, we are using Ashes to Assets and Melee Wellmaker, since we're going to be infinitely bonking things. Melee Wellmaker is one of the most consistent ways to make elemental wells, and as long as we don't lose our hammer, we don't run out of melees. Now you don't have to run Ashes to Assets, obviously. If you are using a healing nade, you can use something like Solar Siphon, where you can generate orbs with your weapons, or some form of ammo finder. Now for arms, we're using Lucent Blade. While charged with light, dealing damage with a sword gives you bonus sword damage for 5 seconds, and it also increases the charge rate for our melee special attack with Lament. I'm also able to run Unstoppable Glaive since Lament has anti-barrier, so if I need to run an Unstoppable or an Overload mod, I can do that there. And then Momentum Transfer, causing damage with the grenade, reduces your melee cooldown. Not absolutely necessary, but you need to run some form of arc mod so that way Lucent Blade is active. Now for our chest, we're going to be using high energy fire, so that way we are able to use up those stacks. We will be stack ×2 since we are using elemental charge, and picking up a weld that matches our subclass type. For the class item, I am using Classy Restoration and Solar Fulmination, but these are not absolutely necessary to run. These are just kind of like fail safes, or just a little bit of a safety blanket to have for this build. You can literally run anything else and it will work just as well. And then I am using Well of Ordnance, so that way when we do pick up a elemental well, it charges our grenade a bit faster, and we can get our healing nade, or we can get whatever nade we are running quicker. Now for the alternative build, all I am switching out is the arms. I am using Fonts of Might and Impact Induction instead of Lucent Blade, so that way I have another way of getting a damage boost with Fonts of Might, but you can use whatever mod you want in that slot. Instead of Fonts of Might, you can use something like Explosive Wellmaker, so you have another form of spawning elemental wells, or elemental armament, or Well of Life. So I apologize if this was a very long-winded explanation of this build. There's just a lot of layers to this, because every aspect of this build is kind of able to be damage boosted. From the solar weapons, your abilities, everything is getting some form of damage boost, and then on top of all of that, Incandescent is getting a damage boost with its Scorch. So again, if I missed anything, please feel free to comment. If you're confused on anything, just let me know. I will try to clear it up as much as possible, or if you need any alternatives, I do my best to help out. It can be very difficult to get the mods you need, sadly, in this game at the moment, but hopefully in the future they will find a way to get people mods that are new lights and such. But until then, if you have any questions, feel free to comment, and again, I will help you. I will do my best to find alternatives, and we will figure something out. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I appreciate all the support, and if you want to join the Sanctuary, feel free to subscribe to stay up to date with more builds, and I do have a lot planned for Arc 3.0 and the future. And as always, so long and good night. 19. Where's my hammer? Pick up the damn hammer. $36. Okay. That is a big difference.